Okay, I wanted to continue with my rants here. Let me just get back to some of these topics. Paul Krugman had such a right-on piece in the New York Times yesterday on the opinion pages. It's titled Charlatans, Cranks in Kansas. And he talks about how 2 years ago, Sam Brownback, who was a United States Senator from Kansas and then ran for governor of Kansas and was elected in, I think, well, whatever year. It was just a couple of years ago. Either in the last election cycle or the one before that. And he came into office and he said, hey, remember that Reaganomics thing? Let's hire Art Laffer, the guy who was the advisor to Ronald Reagan, to be the official advisor for our state. And let's use that Laffer curve, that says that as taxes go down, tax revenue goes up. Which is, I mean, right. I mean, Art Laffer's point is that if your tax rate is 100%, your tax revenue is going to go to zero because nobody's going to work. Well, actually, that's not even true because there are a lot of people who would work for free. I would do this job for free. In fact, I did do this job for free for the first 2-3 years we were on the air. In fact, I paid to do it. I put my savings, Louise and I put our retirement savings into creating this show. And if we had taken any income, we would have paid taxes on it. So the state would have, But in any case, Art Laffer's theory is, well, if taxes are 100%, nobody will work, and so tax revenues will be zero. So therefore, if you cut taxes, you're going to increase tax revenues, tax collections. Well, it was a stupid idea in 1980. In fact, during the primary election, when George Herbert Walker Bush was running against Ronald Reagan for the nomination for president on the Republican side in 1980, George Herbert Walker Bush called it voodoo economics. Reagan later picked him as his vice presidential nominee. Got to get the guy who used to be the head of the CIA, So, I mean, it's not like this hasn't been thoroughly discredited. When we tried it during the Reagan administration, it didn't work. When Clinton raised tax rates, all the supply side people and Art Laffer and all these guys say, oh my God, the sky's going to fall. No, tax collections went up. Hey, you raise tax rates, you get more taxes. I mean, don't raise them to 100%. But we did have them at 91% after you made about $3 million in taxable income for about 40 years in the United States. And during that time, our budget deficits were relatively small. We didn't hit a $1 trillion budget deficit until the Reagan administration. So Reaganomics has been completely discredited. Laffer should be laughed at. But Sam Brownback puts him in charge of Kansas's economic policy, and they say, okay, let's cut taxes. So what happens? Well, as Paul Krugman points out in the New York Times, 2 years ago, Kansas embarked on a remarkable fiscal experiment. It sharply slashed income taxes without any clear idea of what would replace the lost revenue. Sam Brownback, the governor, proposed the legislation. Look out, Texas, he proclaimed. Right? Yeah, right. But, Paul Krugman points out, Kansas is not booming. In fact, its economy is lagging both neighboring states and America as a whole. Meanwhile, the state budget has plunged deep in debt, provoking a Moody's downgrade of its debt. It's gotten so bad in Kansas. The Moody's, the bond rating agency, has said that Kansas has to pay more in interest to bondholders to sell their bonds because they're at a higher risk of default because their fiscal policy is so screwed up because Sam Brownback is listening to Art Laffer, et cetera. And then Krugman goes on to point out that ALEC was behind this thing. It was promoting this thing. ALEC, of course, the American Legislative Exchange Council that promotes this kind of stuff on the state level. ALEC, of course, funded by the Koch brothers and other billionaires. And really, the only people who benefit from these kind of huge tax cuts that Art Laffer proposed, the only people who benefited in the 80s during Reagan. The only people who benefit to this day, I mean, we're up to 39% at the top rate after you start earning $3 or $4 million a year. But actually, it's a lot lower than that. I think 39% kicks in around 400,000 or 500,000, something like that. But in any case, that's still our top rate. It was 74% when Reagan came into office. And at that rate, CEOs said, okay, I made 30 times what my employees made. Let's just stop it right there. And now CEOs are making 500, 600, 1,000 times what their employees make. And you've got this nouveau riche who are gambling. Everybody's in a maze. The S&P is higher than it's ever been. The Dow is almost at its all-time, and it's going to hit 20,000. Bonds are falling. I would be putting my money in government bonds right now. In fact, I have. Because this market is a house of cards. And it's a house of cards because of idiotic economic policies like Sam Brownback is promoting in Kansas. And because the Republicans won't allow anything but that to get through the House of Representatives.